Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have yet again the amazing Marci on, and every single podcast that we've done together, we have got so much positive feedback, so much, oh my God, I relate. And I think a lot of it is because we don't just talk about shit as it being shit on paper, but the fact that we personally went through the shit ourselves, and Marci always brings her own experiences, and so do I, into this. And this podcast is something that every single one of you will relate to in some way, because how many of you get caught up with self-sabotage? How many of you beat yourself up over things that seem really big but in retrospect aren't? Or how many times do you feel like you should be doing more, you're not doing good enough? And I'm pretty sure a lot of you have some type of trigger food, or maybe it's alcohol. Maybe it's trying to be social, but you want these results. But then you think that you need to be eating in a certain way all the time without realizing that dieting is a phase. So all of a sudden, everything is now like precious gold. So with that, here's Marci. And I'm going to let you introduce your biggest, I guess, the things that sabotaged you the most, and things that you see sabotage a lot of women in this journey.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. Three-peat appearance on my part, right? Yes. I think this is the third time.
It's the fourth time, actually.
Is it the fourth?
Yeah, I put one on, and that one was really powerful. The one where you can't just put life on hold when it's busy. You need to dance in the rain.
You need to dance in the rain. I love it. Well, anyway, thank you for having me on again. I know we haven't connected in a while, just because, as you said, the time changed, and then I was sick and I was kind of taking some time off of social media. So here we are back again, reunited. So excited to be here. It's interesting because for me, my story is very different than many of my clients. So, and this is interesting, and you and I were kind of talking about it offline before we started to record, but figuring out who is our ideal client, who is the woman that we are trying to speak to. And ironically, I guess, I have been trying to speak to a certain woman who is more the former version of me. And I'm almost attracting the opposite of that. So yes, sometimes women who are struggling with under eating, over exercising, doing too much, not the opposite of I have a hard time motivating myself to go to the gym, or I am emotionally eating, that kind of thing. So that's actually more the majority of my clientele. But for me, when I got started, so I'm 38, and I got into fitness when I was 15. I was going to the gym before my high school classes started. I was doing step aerobics, and then I'd go back later in the afternoon and I would lift weights, and I was really, really into it. And it started off in a healthy way. And then as time went on, I started to learn more and was diving into the fitness magazines and seeing the women on the covers who were these just specimens, for lack of a better word. They were muscular, they were lean, and that's what I wanted to look like. I envied that figure competitor physique. I did not want to look like the skinny, wafy woman on the cover of Shape magazine. So I did what I thought I should do, was follow the plan in the magazine, which essentially, looking back, was like a competition prep, let's be honest. So 45 minutes of fasted cardio, and then go back and lift weights and do 1 or 2 body parts a day, 5 or 6 days a week. And your diet's going to be egg beaters, oatmeal, vegetables, and maybe some yams here and there. So it was so restrictive. And that was my life for years. So I developed an eating, I don't want to say a clinical eating disorder, but definitely disordered eating habits and mindset. Same thing with my approach to exercise, really my freshman year of college. And I lost a lot of weight. I became very unhealthy, obsessive. It was just not good. And I guess that was my form of self-sabotage, was not being able to rest or take any time off. Up until a few years ago, when my health got to the point where I really had to do something about it, it was going to be one of those things where nothing changes if nothing changes. and my health had been compromised from what I did, almost 20 years ago. That I had to actually take a step back from the gym, start eating more, give myself more rest days. But up until that point, I could have counted on one hand the number of scheduled training sessions that I had missed, just because I did it no matter what, no matter where I was, how I felt, like I was going to train. So that was one form of self-sabotage, because we need rest, we need recovery. And then same thing with my diet, just being really afraid to lose my leanness, because coming from my background when I was younger, I was a little bit overweight. I was not confident in how I looked. And so when I saw myself get leaner, and I'll never forget when I was in middle school, there was a store, it was called Wet Seal, and it's where, teenage girls went to get their clothes, and crying in the dressing room to my mom because I barely could fit into the largest size shorts. And then I go to college and I'm fitting into extra smalls and double zeros. And it was just like that sense of control, like, oh, wow, finally I can wear whatever I want and I don't have to worry about that. I think I was just so afraid to lose that and go back to what I was previously, that I just held on tight. And it was also a form of control. I think it was the way that I generated my sense of self-worth, and felt like if I look a certain way, if I'm lean, then I'm always going to be safe. I'm always going to be loved, that kind of thing. And that could not be further from the truth. So that is my story of self-sabotage. But again, for my clients, it's usually the opposite. So it comes a lot in the form of overeating, drinking too much as a way to self-soothe, to numb emotions, just to, essentially check out from life. Which, I think we have to have some compassion for that, for sure, because we all have our struggles, our past traumas, and big feelings can be very uncomfortable to deal with. So what do? We take the path of least resistance, and we, quite literally, but I guess proverbially speaking, we numb with food and alcohol. So for someone who has a fat loss goal, that's typically where I see the self-sabotage. Also, not so much with the training, like, yeah, people will miss gym sessions, or they'll give themselves excuses for, why they don't have to go, whatever. But I see it much more in, like, when it comes to the nutrition, definitely.
There's so much more to touch on there. And I guess the biggest thing just regarding you is what I see a lot. People are afraid to lose that end goal that they just got, which might not even be where you want to be, but you just got to this ending and now you're scared to lose it. Especially, this is the one I see the most, especially if you have a history of being overweight, not being confident, and actually grinding your way to get to that leaner body that you are now. And a lot of the time when you grind your way there, it's in a stupid way, like what Marci did with almost a comp prep dumb thing there. And that's what a lot of social media is marketing to us. So we grind our way to this end date, because we don't really get to an end goal by then. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but we get to this end date. And then we're scared to leave there because we just pretty much killed ourselves on the way there. And then we are scared to gain it all back, to lose that confidence. But something else you said, which is really powerful, is you had control, and a lot of the time you were scared to even get a coach. You're scared to even ask for help. You're scared to fully trust the approach that your coach puts you on, or any other approach, because you're scared to let go of that control. What if I go back? What if I lose it? So maybe we can talk more about that and the identity with that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you brought up something just now that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough. And oftentimes when we want to make a change because we are uncomfortable for whatever reason, then we start something. And if we self-sabotage, a lot of people will say, oh, it's because you're afraid of failing. You're a perfectionist. And let's be honest, no one likes to fail. And we can hear all of those cliche sayings like, failure is the path to success, and all of that stuff. And like, yes, it's true, because it teaches you things, you learn lessons, you develop resiliency, you grow from it, and you evolve. But at the same time, that can be very challenging to acknowledge, because I think people take it personally. They see it as truth rather than just objective data for what can be improved. But I think more often than not, and this is the reason why people self-sabotage, they are more afraid of success than they are of failure. And there's actually a book that was written about this called The Big Leap. And it's a fabulous book. And this guy, it was written like years and years ago, but essentially it is, we all have an upper limit. So he calls it the upper limit theory, or our internal thermostat. And we can start seeing a little bit of progress or a little bit of success. And that might feel good, but it's actually a threat to our brain, to our nervous system, because our brain always wants to keep us safe. It does not like the unfamiliar, because when you step into that out of your comfort zone, it's like, what's going to happen? Is the saber-toothed tiger going to pounce? That's kind of like the analogy, if you're like dating back to prehistoric times. So we do, even if it's subconsciously, whatever we can to pull ourselves back to that safety, because that threat of the unknown, that's okay, it happens. The threat of the unknown is more uncomfortable than the current discomfort that they are sitting in.
I find as well, it's because we're so used to the identity we're in now. We're so used to, we like identify with the dieter. We identify with the people that we involve ourselves with, and we fear losing them, or we fear people seeing us in a certain way and then losing whatever we had. And I had this conversation with one of my girls ages ago, and she realized that she was going to have to become a different person for other people. And that was the thing she was afraid of. Like, because I've always been this way, I've always put the weight back on, I've always sabotaged. So then she expects it. So then she keeps doing it to herself. And this is something where this is why journaling, if you listened to the last podcast with Jared Hamilton, make sure you listen to it and take notes, because you aren't actively having mindful moments, if you aren't actively journaling, actively doing things to question your beliefs, to question what's going through your mind, you're going to keep repeating the same toxic shit without even meaning to, because that's your automatic, that's what you go to. You, like Marci said, you go to the path of least resistance, which, as you know, my cable analogy for those new here, when you have,
I haven't heard it.
You haven't heard it? Okay, so the cable analogy, you have these habits, you have these identities. Your brain sends electric signals to your body, which is why I came up with the cable analogy. Think of it like electricity. Your brain sends signals through these really thick cables that only get thicker over time, because that's what happens, they get stronger. But then as you try to form new neural pathways, new cables, what do you think your brain's going to want to do? It wants to go through the bigger cable still. So you have to force change. You have to force it to go down the new thinner cables. And then as you start, you can't just say, okay, here's a new habit, let's just develop this and then leave it. Because no, just like muscles, it atrophies, it shrinks if you don't keep practicing it. So you have to keep practicing, sending the signal through that cable until that starts to thicken. And the thing is, this is where relapse comes in, because you're going to go back to the old cables now and then. But over time, those cables start to weaken. But it takes a shitload of time, because it's just like a bloody oak tree. Like, it takes time to shrink. And you need to keep feeding the ones that you want so that the others fade away. But just like freaking fat cells, unless you want to get the liposuction done, they don't die. They only grow and shrink. So that's your habits and your identity.
But what you just said is essentially neuroscience. So we all have those pathways in our brain that are like hardwired circuits that have been in there for a very long time. Maybe you started to develop these beliefs when you were a child, and most often those beliefs are not yours. They are something that has been imprinted upon you from another person or society. So for example, I'll use myself. Growing up, I had grandmothers who were very image conscious. So on my dad's side, my grandma was probably 98 pounds. Looking back, I'm sure she had some sort of an eating disorder, let's be honest. But yeah, aesthetics were very important to her. So every time I would see her, it would be like, oh, you lost weight, or making a comment about my appearance, or she would make a comment about someone else's appearance, kind of, oh, so-and-so gained weight, you know? And then same thing with my mom's mom. So she was the same way. And she didn't make comments to me, even though I was a little bit chunky growing up. But my mom would tell me stories about the comments that she would make to her when she was growing up. So are you really going to eat that? Are you going to go back for seconds? Haven't you had enough? And then the real kicker was when my mom graduated from high school, she went to study abroad in Europe for, I think, a month. And she put on some weight. So when she stepped off the airplane and saw my grandma for the first time, the first thing that my grandma said to my mom was, "What happened to you?" And it was like, because she had gained the weight. So I think my mom started to develop those beliefs that thinness is worthiness, and I need to look a certain way. I need to stay a certain weight to be accepted and loved and all of that. And so she started doing the crazy diets and the exercising and all of that. And I mean, bless her heart, I think that my mom really did try to do a good job to not pass that down to me, which a lot of parents do. But are you okay?
Yeah, I just thought of something.
Oh, I'm like, did we lose the recording?
No, I just thought of something. You know how you said your mom making comments and stuff like that? You know how then you just said that you put your worthiness on that. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that when you judge other people, you're scared of judgment yourself. And if you're if you got brought up around other people judging other people or commenting on other people's appearances, then you're going to grow up being scared of judgment because you just saw someone judging other people. And this is what you really need to don't just say, okay, this is what happened. You need to revisit that moment. And then maybe you'll realize that, hey, my mom was actually really self-conscious about her body too. My mom was a judgmental person, blah, blah, blah. It's like, what does that make her? And what does that make people that judge you? Because if you're confident in yourself, you're not going to be judging other people. You're going to be wanting to encourage them on. You're going to want to be supportive of them, unless you see them doing some stupid dumb shit, and that's a different story.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff can be very subconscious, so you don't even realize what is seeping in. And it can even start, usually it does, before the age of 7, because that is when your brain is like a sponge and your subconscious has never really, or has not fully been formed. So you are too young, your brain is not developed enough to make decisions, not even make decisions for yourself, but to think through things logically and question them. You just take that on as truth, and then that becomes your belief system. So like we said, if this started when you were very young and now you're in your late 20s, 30s, God forbid for some of my clients, 40s, 50s, even 60s, do you think that's going to go away overnight?
That's actually the hardest part I find, because when I get clients that are in their 40s or later, I struggle the most with their mindset, because they feel like I have a post planned on this, and it's something that I'm really wanting to make a series because it's so important. You think you're entitled to results because of your age, because you've been trying to be healthy, because you've been approaching health, because you're eating in a certain way. You think you're entitled to it because you've been trying to do it for years. So then you're not wanting to change because, hey, I've been doing this for ages. Hey, I'm 50. Hey, I should already know what to do. Hey, I don't need to ask for help. Hey, I don't need to face these things that I'm struggling with because of X, Y, Z. But it's like, just because you're a certain age, you are not entitled to your results. Mm-hmm. If you haven't got them already, there is something you are doing in your process that isn't working for you, and you need to be willing to let go of those old beliefs and behaviors if you want to get a new result. You need to consistently do it. Like maintenance, this is why maintenance is progress. Because if you stop doing what you were doing, you're not going to maintain jack shit. So maintaining is progressing in a world where most people don't even know how to maintain.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so going back to what started this conversation about the subconscious and the belief system is what you were speaking to Jared about, which I have not listened to the episode. I will. I'm really interested in what he has to say because he does speak so much on the emotional side of fat loss and working through those limiting beliefs. But journaling is a really great way to do that because it allows you to see things more clearly for what they are. And even like meditation can be helpful with this as well, because when a thought comes in, it helps you realize that thoughts are not facts. They're just things that pop in for whatever reason. Like we said earlier, maybe it is because that it is like a belief system that was put upon you from someone else. Again, family member, society. So for me, growing up reading fitness magazines, basically the message was you need to be thin in order to be beautiful. So that is what we believe. So now we have to do the work to break those beliefs, to rewrite our story and create something that feels more true for us. So I always say when your cognitive load is very high and you have all these thoughts, most of them are negative, swirling up in your brain, with everything else that you have going on as well. So your work stress, your family stress, whatever it might, your to-do list, you really cannot think through things logically or irrationally. You're going to react out of emotion. So if you get all those thoughts down on paper, it releases the weight that they have over you, and then you can start to work through them. You can see them and be like, okay, is this really my truth? Like, who put this here? Because it surely wasn't me. And then you can start to form by writing out, new beliefs. So maybe that's writing out affirmations or just writing the opposite of what that belief system was. And that over time will slowly start to rewire that neural circuitry. But that's really just one step. Then you have to back it up by creating evidence of the opposite. So if this is the belief that I have now, then where is there evidence in your life that that is not true? So I could say, about 5 years ago when I had to gain weight to do a powerlifting, not a competition, but I wanted to train for powerlifting. And my coach at the time said, you're way too underweight. You need to gain in order for me to coach you. So I put on close to, I think, 15 pounds in 3 months. And I really thought that people were going to judge me for it. I was worried about how my partner was going to respond. Like, was he no longer going to find me attractive? And none of that was the case. Like, no one even noticed. I feel like my relationship with my partner at the time improved. So it's just really interesting. That can be evidence of, no, I don't have to be a certain size. I don't have to be, super lean all the time, very thin for other people to love me. So seeking that out is really important it's what's called your reticular, oh my gosh, I can't even say it. It's a mouthful. Reticular activating system. So this is a part of your brain that basically seeks out what it wants to see. So the perfect example is, let's say you went out tomorrow and you bought a new red car. Well, previous to that, you hardly ever see red cars on the road. But now that you have it, now it's yours and you're seeing it every day, now your brain is going to seek out more red cars. So the same can be applied to your belief systems. If I feel this way about me, then I'm going to take the one area where I messed up, the one mistake I made, and make that mean something about myself, or make it mean that, like, oh yes, that belief system that I have is true. And you override all of the other things that you are doing well, all of the areas where you are succeeding. And that's what we really need to focus on, is all of the positive, and just realizing, like, okay, I'm human, I'm going to make a mistake, but that doesn't mean anything about my ability to be successful.
It's funny because that's exactly what we spoke about with Jared. And that's you need to not this is where you need to not worry about other people's opinions or what you do believe and don't believe of yourself up front. Like, speaking as though you are a winner, it's like, yeah, I don't want to do that. What if I fail? Or you need to speak as if, which is something that I try so hard to get my girls to do. And there is that resistance. There's that resistance of, I can't do it perfect. I can't do it right, which I do want to talk about perfectionism, the cognitive load, because then the alcohol self-soothing will fit into that. But when you resist speaking as if the person you want to become, you're resisting a whole transformation. Like, seriously, you don't need to be that person to speak as if. But speaking as if will help you become that person. And like you said, you need to follow it through with actions. Like, be like, I am this, I am a winner. And then actually back it up and celebrate that shit. And something I wanted to talk about is the fact that we celebrate not really celebrate, but, demean our struggles. We berate ourselves when we fail, when we slip up, when we're struggling with something. But when we do one little thing right, it's never good enough because it's nowhere near where we want to be and it's not perfect. And then, oh, there's a social thing on the weekend. I'm not perfect anyway. Let's drink some alcohol, whatever it is. I'll let you take that one away.
Yeah. Well, no, it's really funny because I want to tell a story kind of about affirmations, because that coach that I was speaking about earlier, he was really the person who started me on my self-development journey. And as, for lack of a better word, toxic that relationship is or was, I do credit him for changing a lot of my beliefs and getting me to think about these things. So he would always joke that affirmations were kind of bullshit. And I use them all the time. I do think that they can be powerful, at least for just like shifting your negative thinking in the moment, right? So I'm feeling this way now. Maybe I wake up and I'm not feeling good about myself. Okay, use some affirmations, and maybe that just puts you in a different frame of mind, because thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to action. So if I have this thought, I'm challenging the thought, and now I'm writing this affirmation that I want to be true, or maybe that I do believe, then that's going to make me feel better. And now I'm going to be able to take action in that direction as the person who already has what I want. So the acting as if. But he would always say, people will tell you to, if you're trying to manifest money, look in the mirror and be like, I'm wealthy, I'm abundant. And he's like, but what if you have $20 in your bank account? Like, it's going to be like, but I'm not wealthy and I'm not abundant because I'm pretty much broke. So there can be that disconnect. So sometimes it's like you have to start off a little bit slower. Like, I am working to become someone who is wealthy. I'm working to become someone who is abundant, and then look for evidence of where you might be abundant in other areas. Maybe it's not financially, but maybe you're abundant with the relationships that you have or that kind of thing. So that's just one, I guess, suggestion that I would give for someone who doesn't really know how to use affirmations, but they can certainly be helpful. However, you do have to back them up with action, or you're just going to keep repeating the same patterns.
And this is why it is so freaking important to celebrate your wins, because why would you want to keep backing yourself up if all you do is let yourself down? And the best way to develop confidence is to show up for yourself and to stick to your word. And why do you not do that? Because the expectations you have on yourself are friggin' this big, and you're only playing this small right now. So you need to be patient. And you mentioned sometimes you need to start slow as well. And this is a thing. We want results yesterday. We want to be at the end goal now. But because we hate where we are so much right now, we never actually get to the end goal because that's all we want. So then we start making progress and then we sabotage ourselves because we're not at the end goal and we don't even know what the process is because we don't see it. We're blindsided by the fact that we just want this end goal. So I guess I really want to bring into this the perfectionist mindset and how perfectionism leaks into self-sabotage and leaks into you never really getting to your end goal. And I feel like people play perfectionism like it's this golden badge of honor, like, no, I do everything perfect. I'm the star student. I always achieve highly. And then because we put on such a high pedestal, we don't realize that that actually is us playing at our lowest selves, because then we can use it as a scapegoat for not actually acting imperfectly. So if anything, your perfectionism is you not even performing.
Yes. And you and I, and it's funny because I did write a post a while back, behaviors that are not a badge of honor. And I just went back to look at it. I'm like, did I put perfectionism in there? And I was like, no, I didn't, but I'm going to repurpose that post and add that. That's beautiful. Because yeah, perfectionism is a very big component of self-sabotage. And you and I talked about this on either our first or second podcast because we were discussing David Godfrey, and he talks about that a lot, he and his wife. So they have a business, like, yes, it's a fat loss coaching business, but really what they do is work on people's mindsets, because their theory is you have to have what's called emotional fitness, or you are going to keep self-sabotaging, usually with food. So if you cannot handle your emotions or anything like that, then you use those substances to cope. But, you know, they talk about the high achieving woman, like kind of quote unquote, who is the perfectionist, who's always worried, you know, am I doing enough? Overanalyzing, and that can be exhausting. So the way we shut our brain down is to seek comfort in food or alcohol. But a lot of those women are perfectionists, and they won't even take action because they're worried about failure. And he's like, so yes, like maybe logically that makes sense, but if you really think about it, if you are not taking action at all because you don't think you're going to be perfect, then you're not even putting yourself out there to do anything. So now you're just not living up to your full potential. You're playing small. So how is that serving you? So yes, perfectionism in that right is definitely a form of self-sabotage.
I love that. How is that serving you if you aren't even allowing yourself to act in alignment with your highest potential? And this really does feed into what self-sabotages so many of us, and that's, hey, there's a work lunch and there's pastries. I need to have the pastries. But this also factors into the fact there are so many different ways that we can take this, because it's like, if you think that what you need to do now and the sacrifice you need to make now and how hard it is now to say no is going to be how it's going to be forever, then why would you want to do it now? Because it just feels like it's going to be freaking prison. This is why fat loss is a tiny phase. And if you don't realize that, like, the science behind it as well, like your taste buds change. You won't want things as much anymore once you start to know how good it feels. And because you spent all this time walking your way up to this proverbial mountain, you don't know what it's like to live at the bottom again, because you haven't been there in ages. And the bottom is where life happens. Like, that's where the people are. That's where fun happens. Like, you're keeping yourself up here only because you don't know how good it is to be down here, because you think you see all the sights there, but you actually see so much more when you're in the action, when you're playing the game. And I guess with that, in the whole perfectionism mindset, is if you aren't batting at your best and just trying to avoid not losing instead of trying to chase winning, like, so many of us play to not lose instead of playing to win, because we just want to move away from where we hate. It's like, no, you need to believe in the fact that you can win and then start playing to win, and realize that winning isn't getting to an outcome. It's being able to actually get in the vehicle and drive there, because so many people in the vehicle, they just want to get there. So
yeah,
where does the whole emotional eating, the whole alcoholism, the whole self-sabotage fit into this need for perfection?
well, I think when you're not perfect, or you're worried about what the outcome is going to be, then the way, kind of like what I said earlier, the way that you quell those, I guess, unsettling emotions, like, am I going to be able to live up to my potential? You know, what if someone judges me? You soothe with food and alcohol. So, like, essentially numb the feelings. You don't have to experience them. But the problem is when you do that, yes, maybe you feel better for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, like the amount of time that you're eating or drinking, but then you are still left with the feelings on the other side once you're done. So it's not solving the root of the problem. And then now you really have two problems, maybe even three. So you have the problem itself that you're avoiding, rather than doing the work to address it and take action to improve and help your situation so you can break out of this. Second, now you have the guilt and the shame for engaging in the behavior in the first place. And then third, now maybe you have numerous problems. Maybe it's poor health, excess weight, you're not sleeping properly, you're damaging relationships, that kind of thing. So you just have to think of like long-term consequences.
And then it cycles back into you having a problem with yourself because you have all of these other problems. So now you have more guilt and shame and you're just feeding your cycle. Now, aside from self-sabotage, when we go to alcohol, there is so much more that a lot of people do not understand when it comes to alcohol and your progress. Because not only is it okay, but why do you feel you need to drink? Like you need to drink more than a couple of drinks? Why do you feel the need to drink until you're drunk? Why do you feel the need to drink until you don't have any control over your body and you just finally get to let go and let loose and you can blame it on the alcohol? Like that was, I say that because that was my story with alcohol way back when, which I don't think I've ever spoke about my part in alcohol. It was just you that spoke about that before, but with me, it was the fact that I was not happy with myself. I felt unloved. I felt like, I don't know where it actually came from, but I actually don't even know. All I know is that I used alcohol as a means to go and there was this guy at the nightclub that I always used to use alcohol as my means to just like, I just need a hug, comfort me, I'm like this, I'm like that, it's like, just love me. And I used it as my means to actually let my tears out. Whereas like we use it to avoid owning our feelings, owning our emotions. But aside from that, it's like, why can't you just say no at 2? Knowing that you can have alcohol whenever you want, as long as you put a limit on it, why can't you say no to 2? Why do you need 4? Why do you need to take it to that next level? What is it bringing you? But it's not just that, like, people don't actually realize how much it sabotages not only your physical progress, but your mental progress and your health. And this is something that Marci on recently. So I'm going to let her educate you guys, not only on the progress side of it in terms of the emotional, mental side, but what it actually does for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, alcohol is a toxin. It has no redeeming qualities. It does not benefit your health at all. Even though people will say, oh, there was resveratrol in wine, it's good for you. Do you know how much wine you would have to drink for that resveratrol to be beneficial? So much. So, and there are other ways to get it. So yes, like I think that the health benefits that used to be touted, it is now coming out that that is not the case, and there are no benefits to it whatsoever. Like it actually is a carcinogen. It does increase your likelihood of death and disease and all of that, which, you know, I know we want to avoid. So that's the first thing. And then if you do have physique or performance goals, alcohol is going to affect that as well. It's very calorie dense. It has 7 calories per gram. So that's almost twice the amount as carbs and protein, a little bit less than fat. But the problem with it is it does not do anything to, one, give you nutrients and help fuel your body so that you have energy to get throughout your day, to perform well in your workouts. And it doesn't do anything to fill you up, to keep you full. And then also, if you do get a little bit loose, you know, maybe you have a buzz or you're drunk, then it lowers your inhibitions and your ability to make good choices. So I'm sure people have heard of the drunk munchies, right? Your self-regulation goes out the window when you drink. And I think especially when you reach a certain point. So maybe it's past 2 drinks and you're just like, I'm having such a great day. I'm like, I don't care. I'll get back on track Monday. Like you literally become a different person, right? Your brain is affected. So that is one thing, like you're taking in excess calories and then you are also likely consuming excess calories from extra food. And it's not like we are binging on broccoli when we're drunk. You know, it's going to be pizza and chips and ice cream and that kind of thing, or, you know, the foods that we're eating in a social situation. It impacts sleep. So a lot of people will use the excuse, well, alcohol helps me fall asleep. That might be true, but you're sedated. You are not asleep. And that is why you wake up feeling hungover and groggy and low energy, because your body is not getting that deep REM or, you know, restful sleep that it needs to recover. And not just your physical body, but your brain as well. So You know, if you wake up and you're not feeling your best, you know, do you think that you're going to want to make healthy choices with your nutrition? Or are you going to want to go out to brunch and have a mimosa and pancakes to make yourself feel better? Are you going to want to go to the gym or get your movement in? So there are just so many downstream consequences. It's not just about, yes, it's about the calories, but it affects you in so many other ways, for sure.